For tonight's featured reader, we have this anthology. I'm going to turn it over to Eleanor, and she can kind of lead us on from there.
Thank you, Mark. The anthology is Salem Means Peace. And the occasion for the publication of this anthology was the purpose of the anthology was to convey that the Salem Peace Mosaic, which had been on the Salem Family YMCA building, which was demolished in the fall of 2019, has been preserved. Its preservation was somewhat eclipsed by the pandemic, which followed hard upon its being safely conveyed into storage, and also to remind people and affirm its central meaning that Salem literally means peace. Why poetry? Poetry was an essential part of the Salem Peace Mosaic from the first. A poem composed specifically for it by then poet laureate, Oregon poet laureate Paul Ann Peterson, runs the length of the mosaic, and that poem begins, as you can actually read in the photograph on the cover of the anthology. Salem, we speaking peace each time we say your name. And poetry contributed a great deal to the mosaic. There were poetry workshops associated with it. There are images, phrases, etc., that emerged from those poetry workshops were incorporated along with all the imagery in glass and ceramic of flowers, stars, birds, animals, etc. When we thought to use poetry as a way to reaffirm that message and remind people of the mosaic, we conducted another series of workshops. One of them was conducted by Efrain Diaz Horna for Spanish language poetry. And Spanish language poetry appears in the anthology with English translations that Efrain provided. There was a workshop conducted by Marilyn Johnston at the Oregon School for the Deaf, and poems by those young students appear. For them, English text was a second or third language. For most of them, the first language is American Sign Language. So this is a multilingual, multicultural anthology. And the other workshop I taught right in this room, and it was a workshop of art-inspired poetry of peace. Besides all the text in here, there's visual elements. There are photographs, which the mosaics artist Linda Cotta supplied, including, of course, the beautiful detailed image of the mosaic on the cover, which was designed by Efrain Diaz Horna. And the photographs inside, which were originally in color and which Lynn kindly converted to black and white and tried to tolerate the somewhat loss in quality that occurs with the printing process. But tonight it is the poetry. This anthology is intended to be read in a couple of ways. Of course you can sample, as everyone does with anthologies, but you can also read it from beginning to end. And when you read it from beginning to end, it creates a whole arc. You experience a rising movement, a strong cumulative vision of peace. The poems are loosely grouped. It's not section, 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 but loosely grouped. And at the beginning of each group, there's an image, there's a photograph, and there's also a phrase, which is drawn from the poetry that follows. And before the poems are actually read, I'm just going to read these phrases, which will give you a sense of the whole. Here they are. Let the trees speak. Your pieces are your peace. To connect us again. Slowly we transform from pain. La musica vibra en mi corazón. Light adds to light. Try to imagine the society we could be. Tonight we'll read poems from the first 5 of those groups. And our first reader is Dina Trieste, who will be reading This Once Was Kalapuyan Land, which, if you have the anthology, is on page 3.
I think I need to do a little apology here because I don't pronounce the native language correctly. I've only read it and put it in the poem. This once was Kalapuya land. Kalapuya called the land Shemikati, a place of rest. Settlers claimed that resting place and stayed. Named it Salem, Shalom, Hebrew for peace. How far Shemikati seems from today's busy streets with cars, trucks, pavement that covers miles of once fertile savanna, whose canopy of white oak sheltered an abundant food source. Antip, the camas lily. In bloom, vast fields of violet blue lilies must have seemed a lake, rippling in the breeze, a vision of expanse. A few acres of white oak and camas remain in Bush's Pasture Park, link to that small settlement where pioneers stopped to sink like bulbs, deep roots of a future community. Narrow footpaths wind through the camas in the spring. A daily walk reveals the swell of buds until one day they burst, a startling blue under the oak. This is our inheritance, a legacy of trees to protect in a peaceful valley. A whisper of air could disturb this fragile calm.
Efrain Diaz-Horna could not be with us tonight, but Nitza Hernandez will read the Spanish version of his poem, Pensado I'll leave her to pronounce the title. I'll be reading the English version.
Ay. Pensando en Salem. Me adormece la placidez de Salem. Su sosiego se interrumpe bajo el hervor otoñal de su arboleda, que me cautiva y me despierta. Un oleaje de verdes que se desvanecen, amarillos que irradian nostalgia, rojos que guardan amargos silencios, hacen soñar el rostro de la ciudad que amo. Recuerdo la noche en que llegué a Salem. Cansado caminé pleno de entusiasmo desde la estación de Greyhound a la YMCA, donde me sentí bienvenido y me hospedé. Extraño la vetusta municipalidad, hoy una playa de estacionamiento, y me duele viendo el hueco que alguna vez albergó un pincelazo de Belushi. Me intriga el sacro mutismo de sus árboles, bullendo y colmados de secretos. ¿Qué secretos escucharon? Tal vez los ancestrales y soterrados murmullos de los Calapuyá, o quizás las vicisitudes de los pioneros o el clamor de los hispanohablantes. ¿Acaso los taciturnos gemidos de los sin casa o la mudez xenofóbica que nos mancilla? ¿Qué será? Me digo, que hablen los árboles, que su encendido follaje nos ilumine y nos dé el secreto para seguir fraguando caminos, sueños, peldaños, que nutran como el río Willamette el teselado mosaico de la paz, el mosaico de Salem.
Ephraim wrote both the Spanish and English versions, of course. And this on page 5 is the English version, Thinking of Salem. The placidity of Salem lulls me to sleep. Its calm is interrupted under the autumn boil of its groves, which enthralls and awakens me. A wave of fading greens, yellows that radiate nostalgia, reds that keep bitter silences, make the face of the city I love dream. I remember the night I arrived in Salem. Exhausted, I walked full of excitement from the Greyhound station to the YMCA, where I felt welcomed, and I stayed. I miss the old city hall, today a parking lot, and it hurts me seeing the hole that once was a brushstroke of Belushi. I am intrigued by the sacred silence of its trees, seething and full of secrets. What secrets did they listen to? Perhaps the ancient and buried murmurs of the Calapooya, or perhaps the vicissitudes of the pioneers, or the clamor of the Spanish speakers, perhaps the taciturn moans of the homeless, or the xenophobic dumbness that stains us. What will it be? I say to myself, let the trees speak. May their fiery foliage illuminate us and give us the secret to continue forging roads, dreams, steps that nourish, as the Willamette River, the tessellated mosaic of peace, the Salem mosaic. Our next poet is Elizabeth Martino, but she was struck by a bad cold. So I have asked another Elizabeth, Elizabeth Kaiser, who will be reading a poem of her own later, to read Elizabeth Martino's poem, But Now the Breeze, on page 12.
I really like this poem, so I'm very happy to read it. But Now the Breeze, after a painting by James Southworth. The Hesperides take their final bow, their brilliance lighting the yellow grass on fire, while the rocks become dark silhouettes in the midnight blue water, like sentinels keeping guard. No other human signs, just me alone, sitting on the golden bluff and the clouds meandering in the sky. Calming waves like timid fingers reach for the sand, then retreat to Mother Ocean, their fingernails drumming in perfect rhythm on the shore. Taking their cue from the vanishing light, the birds have gone back to their rests. The drumming lulls them to sleep. Oh, the wind will return tomorrow, but now the breeze whispers to me, don't be afraid of what was or could be. Just be at peace here on the Oregon coast.
Our next poet is Sarah Roars, reading her poem Interlude Under the Sky on page 14.
Thank you. Interlude Under the Sky. There is peace even in the storm, Vincent van Gogh. Charged air like waves rolls over the fields. Flowers and grass flap and touch me, tug on my coat as I walk on the road and pick up a broken rock from the clotted ground. The clouds undulate above as the sun races down the sky, arresting this blue and green. Such immaculate white to find a glow in the fields, to see rising from the maze of wind, sky, and rain. In the distant roar and clap, the wild birds circle. A dove struggles on her nest and coos. Let my head soak when the clouds break. Let my feet leave pavement and roll through the softly waving golden grass. In a stiff wind, I know all goodbyes will end in glad hymns, will return in earth. Black hills, trees, indistinct, in the distance are my witness. That old weight in my arms, why continue to measure? Let everything fall to the kind ground. Thank you.
You can see me looking for someone I hadn't seen yet this evening. That last line, let everything fall to the kind ground, has just stayed with me. Our next reader is Jess Coleman, reading her poem River, which is on page 16.
River. Oops. Where I live, the sacred seeps in and a little profane leaks out. Granted, the material remnants of human carelessness slump slewward to accumulate along the tracks. But salamanders and snakes shelter in hedges, Squirrels and jays vie for acorns in a neither friendly nor acrimonious contest, and the dawn chorus floats over from the slough to pick up the tune where the frogs and owls left it. The looping playlist shares disk space with speakers mounted on shoulders or bikes, one that broadcasts only Black Sabbath's Electric Funeral. Either it's set to repeat, or it just happens to come up whenever the guy goes by. And every few hours, a clattering freight train drowns out the ghosts of past and future losses rattling chains. When I cross over, I follow the slough road till I get to a scene I saw painted in a gallery. The artist found it so pretty. I can't remember if the painted cottonwoods brushed the sky with summer leaves or etched it with jagged crowns. Either way, it was vermilion, which is what I recognize since I go there only at day's end, and days determine color more than seasons do. Through the trees waits a river whose current I've been warned about, but it reveals only stillness, along with the sky and sometimes moon, and I cannot fathom how something so powerful with somewhere to be is unmoving. This is no matter what turbulence I've brought to it. I've touched it with my hands with disproportionate joy. I'm still undecided about the prospect of full immersion. Without knowing what it knows or having any power to speak of or with it, I run alongside it until a wedge of earth parts us and I dissolve back into trees. It will be here when I loop back again, and nothing that came between us will ever come to anything.
Thank you, Jess. So glad you were actually here. And now we get to hear Elizabeth Kaiser read a poem of her own, Kindred Souls, on page 21.
I wrote this poem right here in this room in Eleanor's workshop for this mosaic project after looking at an art exhibit upstairs. And it's the artwork that I write about here was done by Carolyn Lale. Probably some of you know her. And thanks to Eleanor, I've become acquainted with her. She has toured my home and looked at my mother's art, which I also write about in the poem. And then I've gone to her house and seen her studio and her office and every room in her house, which is filled with art, not only hers but other people's. Kindred Souls. I come to the gallery seeking solace for a recent loss, not to mention a world in turmoil, future under threat. A loss recalling yours, the most profound I've suffered. But the plethora of bright gardens and bouquets and their brilliant reds, oranges, purples, and golds serves only to mock my somber mood. Even falling water, still pools, and surging surf fail to refresh my fevered spirit. At last my eyes are drawn to a small sketch, one of a series of seasonal scenes labeled July and entitled Hope. July, the present month, the month of your birth, the month 100 years later when we scattered your ashes atop the hill you loved and rendered in a drawing of your own. What rivets me is both the subject, 2 green acorns nestled in a bed of oak leaves to represent the white oak's fruiting season, and its medium colored pencil, your own favorite. The drawing with its dark background bears an uncanny resemblance to one of yours hanging from my kitchen wall. Just beneath Hopeful hangs the artist's August image, lush green fronds viewed from a nearby bench and entitled A Place to Rest. August, a month you loathed for its heat, dust, smoke, and fear of the farmhouse well run dry. But your creative well did not, for I still have your peaceful harvest scene, the view from our front door. 2 aging maples shade a walk that leads the eye across the country road to a golden field, a forest in the background, mountains more distant still. As I stand and gaze before hopeful and a place to rest, a sense of deep repose steals over me and of communion with you 2 artists, kindred souls, one of whom still nurtures me.
So happy to learn of that artist-to-artist connection that was made. Our next reader is Marilyn Johnston, reading To You, Daughters, which is on page 23.
Oh, thank you, and so good to be on these pages with these writers and all of you out here that have come to listen. To you, daughters, I knew all along you'd be travelers, so eager to be somewhere you didn't know the rules or hadn't decoded the spoken words, relishing life like a dish you hadn't yet tasted. Expect the unexpected, the motto in our house as you grew. I wanted you to try it all, to talk with strangers, stand strong to your beliefs, your name. You won't recall the trailer we lived in before we moved to the cul-de-sac off 48th, but you'll remember the house on Sonia, the acre where you tended the animals, making paths through the field in the thick grass of summer. Together as a family, we'd study the insects, the stars, plant a tree for each of your years, identify the birds that circled the call of the geese, watch them through binoculars so you could see whether they were westerns or cacklers. Now, you tell your children to go outdoors each day, put their hands in the garden soil, urge them to describe the snow as it falls on their cheeks. During the ice storm, when the pines we'd planted for your first year split and fell, leaving an opening that showed the heart of them, that cut deep in me too, like a parting with no goodbye. So I'm writing this in a quiet house after a day worn thin from the latest news, a new virus, 10 wars still waging somewhere in the world. And I want you to know that your dad and I are still trying to dream peace at night, and maybe all the nights after this, even though an army could be ready to crest the hill. And we're still here waiting at the end of the worn path, our door ready to swing open.
And now we'll have Nitza Hernandez reading a poem of her own in English, New Seeds, which you'll find on page 24.
So, like Elizabeth, I participated in that workshop that Eleanor organized for a group of poets that were so interested and enthusiastic about sharing ideas and being inspired by some of the art that was exhibited there at that time. And I was inspired in one of the artwork, and I am so sorry. I feel a little bit, ashamed that I didn't jot it down the name. But it was one of the pieces right here. And also I want to acknowledge the experience of participating in the workshop in groups, because at least for me, it was the first time of being critiqued by other poets. So it was a beautiful challenge and something very inspiring that I learned very much about that experience. So it's called New Seeds. We remember, we remember who sowed us in the soil. They were kind-hearted, kindred spirits from a blue-purple sky. We are seeds in moving stillness, immersed with water in the ground, the curvatures of our tiny bodies softly cracking out, opening from the heart of earth, quietly emerging as liberated seeds, connecting our roots and rising up, growing stems and emerald leaves, unfurling from the ground up. Our tears overflowed to cleanse distress. Slowly we transformed from pain, and our souls now dance like butterflies. Black, brown, indigenous women, our new sprouts merging with those of other women on earth. All blossoming as one, a universal garden of light, an orange sun as our only breath, our guardian flame. We follow the deep rumbles of our drums to make beauty and feed justice in the world with loving, peaceful songs. Thank you.
These poems really grew far beyond that workshop. And our penultimate reader is Jim Merrill reading Pink, the Color of Life, which you'll find on page 26.
Thanks, Eleanor. This poem started here. It was ekphrastic, meaning I looked at a painting and it had red roots down into the soil at the bottom of the painting. And that got me started. And then I sat on those stairs and looked out the window. It was a wonderful day. Pink, the color of life. Pink roots and red blood rivulets wend their way, seeping through plastic. That was on the canvas. Seeping through plastic, reaching down through human clay and black soil. When roots like these reach deep, not to be prevented or blocked by concrete, we feel all is well. Pink is the color of the sky at sunset and in the bathtub after my boy's bath. It's the furry dice hanging in the windshield of that 57 Chevy. And it's the color of the trout's underbelly that I caught in Spring Creek Pool before the knife enters to clean it. Pink appears at the bottom of these steps, looking through a window just inches away. We see the perfect pink California sage with her honeybee alighting on bud after bud, sampling nectar. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark. I'm going to wind up with another art-inspired poem. For that workshop, I remember saying it doesn't have to be ekphrastic. It doesn't have to stay really close to the painting. It could just be inspired by it. Right. You could go off anywhere with it. This one, I guess, is pretty much an ekphrastic poem. It's called Marigold, after a painting by James Southworth, whom I learned was the dentist of at least one of the people in the workshop, who is right here. And I hope you'll hear from her later. Marigold, after a painting by James Southworth. And maybe you need a little bit of information here. I did a tiny bit of research here, and I learned that when bees zoom in to a flower, they initially see in black and white. And it's only when they get very close that it turns into color. It's a very interesting way of seeing the world. Is this how a bee sees it? Close up, when the black and white has switched, as in a cinematic special effect, to color? A single flower fills the field of view. No, not a single flower, but many tiny, true flowers, tight packed into a central disc, ringed round by two concentric tiers of brightly colored tabs. Radial symmetry making a target, directing the bee to the bullseye of the disc, thick with vials of nectar. A marigold is a sun that the bee can plunge into without harm, where it can home in on the center, land there, and sup. And this oversized marigold of paint is a sun that I can gaze at unscathed, where I can bask in a blaze of red, orange, and gold, missing only the familiar late summer tang of the real flowers' smell. Thank you for being such a wonderful audience for all of us. I know some of you have had copies of the book already to follow the poems. I have a box of them back there. They are for sale at $12 each. If you're writing checks, it should be payable to Save the Salem Peace Mosaic. The money all is going toward the reinstallation of the Peace Mosaic at, we hope, a new building that the Salem Riverfront Carousel will be erecting called The Stables, which will be a studio for the carousel artists and a sort of education center. So thank you. Thank you for listening so well.
Thank you, Eleanor, and thank you all the readers. We're going to take a little bit of a break. We have 2 sign-up sheets in the back. If you want to be on the Salem Poetry Project mailing list, sign up on the mailing list. And if you want to be on the open mic, sign up on the open mic. And so we'll take a couple minutes to go buy some books, and I don't know what else is going on over there. And then we'll come back and have the open mic here in a couple minutes.